I'm going to invite Elder Fred Campion to step up.
Thank you very much. Good morning. In my language, I greet you all, and I want to especially focus and say a prayer on the Latteroot family and the Jackknife family here this morning, as well as all of our families that are in our communities that are experiencing similar situations where their loved ones may be lost. And we're praying for, the blessing of each and every one of us to come together as human beings, recognizing our inherent rights as people being on the land, and creating this friendship and this the friendship treaties that we have. I'm a spiritual leader of my people, my ancestors. I come from a lineage where my family was carrying on with ceremonies back in the day, even before treaty was signed. So I represent my great-great-grandfathers and grandfathers and so forth, and grandmothers who were displaced and put aside by the dominant religions of that time in our territory. And I grew up hearing the stories of that suffering and oppression from those times. So today I not only want to be a voice for our people that are lost and missing, but I also want to be a voice for those ancestors that suffered those types of injustices back then. I've worked in the justice system for 30 years as an elder, providing services in the Correction Service of Canada and the provincial systems as well. And I know all too well all the stories and the experiences that our people are going through, and the numbers that are high in these institutions. So I just want to point that out before I say my blessing, my prayer this morning. And thank you to Chief McPhee for inviting me to participate, as well as Carrie Thompson and all of her peers and colleagues in this endeavor. And I will continue to support where I'm called on with our blessings and our traditions and our ceremonies. So with that, I ask for your indulgence and your support and your prayer to say a short prayer here again this morning to connect all of us together and to be able to open those doors of friendship. And the allies that we create in this work is very important. The recognition of all the diverse cultures and people that are on our land. And so with that, again, to the family, my deepest empathy and sympathy and condolences, and being able to bring some closure to the losses that you have been experiencing for many years. So with that, my prayer and my heart is out to you folks, and I hope that you will gather yourselves and continue to believe and work together and come together, because all of this experience has broken us, broken families, and a lot of social issues that are happening because of it. So again, I'll ask for your prayer and your help.
Elder Campion, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for just being here and blessing on a difficult day, but certainly one where hopefully we have some closure, but doesn't make it easier. Tansei, good morning and welcome. The families of Latteroot, Jackknife families, heartfelt condolences. I know this doesn't bring back, but hopefully gives some closure and hopefully gives you some comfort. Before I start, I obviously want to acknowledge my colleagues, the chiefs that have made this journey, all of the public that are here as well to be with us. And it's fitting today that, like any other time when we speak, that we begin with acknowledging the land and the territory that we stand on today. This is Treaty 6 territory, Métis Nation Region 4, the ancestral and traditional gathering grounds of home centuries of Indigenous peoples, including but not limited to the Cree, the Dene, the Anishinaabe, the Blackfoot, the Papas Chase, the Nakota Sioux, and the Métis people. I want to be very clear that a treaty acknowledgement is just not something we should say. It is something that we as Canadians should strive to truly understand and appreciate. Because to understand and acknowledge that we are all treaty people is to understand the significance in the history of the land that we all share today. And to acknowledge the history is also to acknowledge the tragic fate and the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, 2S+ persons we are still searching for. And we cannot sleep or rest till we find the answers. The EPS will continue investigating their disappearances no matter how much time has passed. Today we announce the return of 2 of those missing women to their families. Thanks to the joint efforts of the EPS Historical Crimes Unit, the RCMP, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the Institute for Advancement of Aboriginal Women, and the City of Indigenous Relations Office, we are at long last able to identify Louise Lattereau and Irene Jackknife, who were found dead of non-criminal causes nearly 50 years ago. We know that naming now is bittersweet addition to the long saga of grief and pain. It's not easy, nor should it erase the pain of the loved ones have suffered or the decades of searching they have endured. So to the families of Louise and Irene, as I said, we offer our deepest condolences, and we walk with you in your journey of healing. I wish that your loved ones had identified and obviously returned sooner. And to those that we're still searching for, that is always something that we continue to work for. For those that are here today, that I ask you to be respectful of the families. I know there's lots of questions you probably want to ask, but I want to put it in perspective to you. Having a talk with one of the family members this morning, to put it in perspective, he hasn't seen his mother for 51 years. So there's a lot of grieving and a lot of emotion, and I think it's important that we all are respectful for the family members today as they come to grips and come to terms with what this means. Again, I want to thank the chiefs. I want to right now turn the proceedings over to the Confederation of Treaty 8 First Nations Grand Chief Arthur Noski to say a few words, and very much appreciate you being here, Grand Chief. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you, Dale, and I appreciate all of those that are here, the officers, the investigators, and all your work, your hard work. I appreciate that, and I'm thankful for that. And for the family, I know it's not closure. It's not closure. So a lot of times when our loved ones are deceased, we question why and who, right? And even though if they've been incarcerated, we question, like too short of a sentence. I think the biggest issue that society has today is their lack of respect for life. And I say this, it seems like our people are vulnerable. You look at the rest of society and you think, well, why are they so vulnerable? Well, I stand here today and I can say I am untainted by the Indian residential school. And in saying that, I was raised on the land and I got to respect life, all sorts of life. And when you respect life, you respect everything. You respect animals, you respect people. You respect every nationality of people because that's the education the land gave you. So the vulnerability is because of that. We are a trusting people. We suffered from the treaty because the people had the pen and the language to basically cheat our people out of the way of life that they had. And I'm thankful for the RCMP, the police, in their work, because at least there is an opportunity for justice. And even though we've been in courts all our lives as the treaty people, we've swayed the country through courts. And hopefully at some point that there'll be a reckoning. Yes, we are a sovereign people that have a treaty with the imperial crown. And all the resources of the land are ours. They were ours and they are ours. So I encourage, the chiefs of every nationality across Canada, stand up. Take the pen of your sovereignhood, because you can make laws. You can change the future for your people, for your children, for your grandchildren. And I know that the treaty making, the RCMP were a part of it. The Redcoats back in those days. And our elders were told that treaty making, these people will be there to protect you. And sad to say, family, that 51 years ago, we cannot protect the past, but we can protect the future. With that, thank you very much. Hey, hey.
Well, thank you, Grand Chief Noski. Good morning and welcome. My name is Colin Dirksen. I'm the inspector in charge of the EPS Major Crimes Branch. And within Major Crimes Branch, we have the Historical Crimes section. And that section is responsible for investigating all historical homicides and historical sexual assaults. Also within that section is the Missing Persons Unit. And our Missing Persons Unit is responsible for investigating all cases of unidentified human remains. The EPS currently carries 20 outstanding unidentified human remains investigations, some dating back as far as the 70s. And our investigators know from experience just how each unresolved investigation can be the source of family trauma for years, for generations even. And that's why in August of this past year, 2023, we launched Project Match in partnership with the RCMP National Centre for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains, as well as the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And through this project, Project Match, we intend to review each one of these 20 UHR investigations in question through a modern investigative lens using today's technology. So we began Project Match by taking on two heartbreaking stories from 1975 and 1976, respectively. On July 30th, 1975, EPS officers were called to the scene of a deceased female whose body had been located in the North Saskatchewan River. An autopsy determined that her death was due to drowning, and her death was ruled non-criminal. At that time, police efforts to identify her were unsuccessful, and she was buried in a cemetery here in Edmonton, unnamed. And thanks to the efforts of the Project Match partnerships, an exhumation was carried out and DNA testing was performed. And we were able to identify her as Louise Latteroute. Louise was just 24 at the time of her death back in 1975. And on June 11, 1976, EPS officers were called to a residence in Edmonton where a deceased female was located outside that address. An autopsy determined that she died from medical causes, and her death was deemed to be non-criminal as well. Again, police were unable to identify her at the time with the means they had available to them, and she was buried in an Edmonton cemetery, again unnamed. Also through Project Match, the initiative and partnerships, an exhumation was carried out and DNA testing was performed as well. And we identified her as Irene Jackknife. Irene was only 30 at the time of her death. In both cases, the medical examiner and a forensic anthropologist have reviewed the reports from the initial autopsies and re-examined the remains. And my investigators as well have reviewed the original police files. We wanted to make sure that we did a thorough review of those files to check the original conclusions that were arrived at back in the 70s. And from our review of these investigations, there is no evidence to suggest that either woman's death was criminal in nature. And it's my heartfelt hope that the thorough review of these two cases provides some answers to the families. Again, we can never provide that closure, but at least some answers to you folks who for so long have gone without. And I want now to give these families a chance to say, in their own words, what's in their hearts. So Carrie Thomason, who is our Missing Persons Unit Indigenous Navigator, has been asked to share some statements from both Louise Latteroute and Irene Jackknife's families.
Tunstay, good morning. So on behalf of Irene Jackman, our mother, Irene Jackman, was a very fun and loving mother that loved baking and cooking. She would play on the floor with us, and if we didn't have toys at the time, she would make cut-out figures and different toys from cardboard boxes. We would often play outside and climb on the crabapple tree, and we would eat the crabapples plentiful. These are the loving memories that bring comfort to me and my family after having no answers for so many years, and the what ifs, and now we have some answers. She is back with us where she belongs. We never gave up on her because she would never give up on us. She is completely a part of us. We love you, Mom. And on behalf of the Latteroute family, I wish we could have found you back then. Love you and miss you. Love Reva, Sister Reva. I love you and miss you, Auntie Louise. Love Wendy, your niece. Louise, we've always wondered what happened when you went missing in 1975, and if you would ever be found. We've never stopped searching for you and never stopped trying to get a missing persons file opened for you at by various family members, myself included. Would go to the local police stations over the years. On the evening you went missing, Mom and Dad went there, and as soon as Reva notified them, they went to the Edmonton Jasper Place, West Edmonton police station. We've never forgotten about you, and we never will. We know that your life had never been an easy one, and as we don't know what really happened when you went missing from home in 1975, as both doors were open wide and you were nowhere to be found, that something would have been done to start a search for you. You should have been safe in your own home. Love you always, Sister Louise, Sweetie Pie, as we always called you. Miss you forever. Your Sister Ruth. I never quit wondering. Love you, Louise. Your youngest sister, Sherry.
Thank you, Carrie. These two files we're talking about today have been some of the most emotional investigations our Historical Crimes Unit and our Missing Persons Unit have worked on. Certainly, Carrie, one of the most impactful outcomes. And members of the Latteroute and Jackknife families, our hearts go out to you, and I just want to make sure we extend our heartfelt thanks for all the cooperation along the way, your open minds and hearts, and we extend all our time, our energy and effort to you going forward. For any questions you have, please come to us. So now I'd like to invite Josie Nepanak to come up on behalf of the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women to provide our final remarks for this morning. Josie.
Thank you. This is a very difficult day for many, particularly the Latteroute and the Jackknife family. I'd like to offer my sincere condolences to all of you, and that you may have some relief from the grief and from your loss. I would like to begin by thanking the elder for your prayer, Chief McPhee for the land acknowledgement, Regional Chief Noski, your beautiful headdress, other chiefs that are present as well. Today is a day to remember the spirits of these beautiful women. They were mothers. They were grandmothers. They were daughters, aunties, nieces. They are loved and obviously very missed by their family and taken away far too soon. There is an epidemic in this country. The epidemic is missing and murdered Indigenous women. And these gatherings and these collaborations and bringing folks together bring us closer to solving many of those issues that continue to place Indigenous women in very vulnerable positions. So I'm very thankful for this opportunity to address you as the president for the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women. We are very much in gratitude of the partnership with the Edmonton Police Services, the RCMP, and the Medical Examiner's Office, who worked very, very hard to solve these matters. The IAAW had provided some funds to support this work because we believe that all families must have answers to their missing loved ones. And I'd like to say to the families as well that the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women has some justice funds to support you as families as you take your loved one home to their final resting place. Rochelle Venn is over here, and she will. You can talk to her about some of the supports that you need. Today is also a celebration for many of us, family members who strive to find answers, justice, and closure. There is still much to do. There are remains of Indigenous people across this country in unmarked graves, and also in university labs as well that are being studied. And many of those family members, and this is a great example of a collaboration that works with EPS, RCMP, Medical Examiner's Office, and Indigenous women's organizations such as IAAW. This is the beginning of the work that can happen across this country to solve many of the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We can share a path of reconciliation, to walk that path together, to solve and to bring closure and peace and safety. The National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women calls to action the continued resourcing to Indigenous women's organizations, but also to police services across the country, so that agencies are properly funded to do this work. IAAW, Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women, is a not-for-profit, and we work on a dime, right? We are not-for-profit, we don't make any money, but we had some money to provide to this project because we believe that the work is important. I'd like to end by thanking everyone for the hard work that you did, the police services, the RCMP, the families who continued to push forward the fact that your loved one is missing, and talking to police and never giving up hope, I believe is really important. 51 years later, you have some answers, and that you are able to take your loved one home to her final resting place. And that is very, very meaningful. So I want to thank you, everyone, for the hard work that you did. And to our CEO, Rochelle Venn, as well, who, Carrie Thomason, for the hard work that you did for caring about these families, these women, so that we can have a safer place in this country for Indigenous women to be able to walk in safety, where often there is violence against Indigenous women. We need to create a safer environment for everyone in this country. So I want to thank you very much.
Morning. There's definitely several factors that we consider when we identify these cases for investigation, and certainly one of them is the age of the file itself. We know that family members are aging, we know that witnesses are aging, and that evidence ages. And so certainly we go back and we look at our oldest investigations. As Inspector Dirksen mentioned, we have ones dating back to the 70s, and we want to address those ones as soon as possible, because if we are able to bring some answers to it, then we are able to give some answers to surviving family members. So age of the investigation matters. The existence of actual remains, DNA samples, et cetera, is also considered. And lastly, we definitely do consider the missing and murdered Indigenous persons criteria or cases as well, because we are well aware that the Indigenous community was underserved, and we want to address those as best as we can.
In March of 2021, there was a missing persons report put out to the media for Mrs. Laveroute. Can anyone speak to why that was put out at that time, and what was new in the investigation that prompted that?
And sorry, can you just clarify the date?
March of 2021. It was posted on the UPS website.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what I would clarify is that although the family did make efforts over the years to report Louise missing, this matter came to a beginning for us in 2019 in our office, and was fully reinvestigated, started over, was worked intensively by our missing persons unit, who began to investigate that whole process over again. And part of that investigation involved putting out new information to the public.
And so just a clarification on the number, is it 20 cases that you still have?
Yes, I think there was a correction made, so it is 20 within the Edmonton jurisdiction, yes.
Including these two, or?
I'd have to, yes, I believe so, yeah, yeah.
Are you able to say with respect to the investigation, like what changed that you were able to put a name?
I think the easiest is to look back to the age of these investigations, and in 1975, I think it's pretty well known to the area that DNA wasn't a consideration then, and there was no DNA data bank for missing persons. In fact, the National DNA Data Bank for Missing Persons didn't come online until 2018. So that was, the investigation at the time involved things like fingerprints and putting things out to the media and descriptions, but there wasn't these centralized databases that were available. So the DNA Data Bank came online in 2018, and since then it's been a consideration for all of our investigations. And the fact that we were able to link these two cases, exhume these remains, get DNA samples through the ME's work and submissions to the National DNA Data Bank is what allowed us to match these two cases.
Just for the folks watching at home, can you kind of break down like how a 50-year-old cold case gets worked by an investigator? Like, is it reading through files, it's talking to people, it's like what goes into investigating a 50-year-old case?
Yeah, I think, well, you hit it on the head. I'm going to be honest, a lot of it is reading. It's combing through historical records, and you can imagine looking at records that are 50 years old. Reports from 1960s, 1970s are quite different than they are now. So it's reviewing existing reports, what we can find. It's auditing exhibits, what we may have retained, what might be retained by the medical examiner's office or our office. It's interviewing witnesses, and that's where I spoke to the age of the investigations matters, because we want to try and get to witnesses who are still with us. Interviewing witnesses, considering DNA, forensic samples, resubmission of forensic samples, because the threshold for DNA has changed so much over the years. So all of those things play a factor for sure. And it is a lengthy process, I'm not going to lie. And I might let my ME partners and Carrie jump in on that, but what I will say is that, there are challenges to these investigations. The EPS Missing Persons Unit is a small area, and the unidentified human remains is a part of their work. And, there is a lack of dedicated resources, and so we are struggling with the constant balance of investigating current files and also historic files. And so we're always balancing trying to get back to those historic investigations for sure.
I'll let you introduce yourself.
Dr. Akmal Kutsia Khan, Chief Medical Examiner for the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Alberta. So similar to what Staff Sergeant said as well, we've got current cases that are also being to be balanced with historical cases as well. And we go through the process of working collaboratively with the police as well as our other stakeholders to review these files and the potential of making that identification. So with regards to DNA, especially with the remains that are very, very old, you would have to get DNA from skeletal samples, which would be bone samples. And so that can take long to do as well. And then you would need something to compare it to. So when we're doing the match, you would have to have something to compare it to. So on the database, there would have to be a next of kin or a family member that you can compare it to. So before we would run those tests, we want to make sure that we've had a chance to speak to witnesses as well as potential next of kin so that their DNA is on the database for us to be able to compare that. And then sometimes that can take long for it to actually occur. But once that happens, we can use the database to do the comparison.
My second question, I'm hoping perhaps to hear from the Grand Chief and perhaps also from Chief McPhee. We've heard mention of how we have this epidemic in Canada, missing and murdered Indigenous women. I'm wondering what lessons do you think the rest of the country can take from what EPS has done, if there are broader implications that are useful to that?
I can start. Certainly, I think as the Grand Chief said too, is first and foremost, we're not going to rest until we can do it and find out what we can. Now, I think, you mentioned DNA coming back years ago, or being introduced years ago, but we're going to be looking at all different types of innovation right now. AI. There's so many different things now to find leads of people that we haven't had the ability to do before. And I think, and it's a lot of credit, as Staff Sergeant mentioned here, in relation to the work of our people and certainly the partnerships that we have and IAW as well. It's when you put the partnership together to say we're just going to follow this relentlessly till we get some answers. But that said I really want to speak to the fact that the way we're going to get ahead of this stuff is use innovation. There's things that exist now that never have existed. We have to use it appropriately, we have to use it properly, but when we have families that have been missing people for 51 years, I think it's time that we used anything that's available to us to at least try to solve these things, and I think you're going to see that become the norm in policing. And certainly, my deputy chief over there, LaForce, right now, this is in the mandate letter, we need to become innovative, because the same thing, doing the same thing over and over, where we just assign another detective to look through files and cases, when we can use other means to do that quicker, faster, to get some solutions to people. I think what we're starting to do, and what I would encourage at EPS, is we're putting the real victims, the family, as the complainant in relation to how we can solve this for them. Often we're looking at the charges. Sometimes these, as you heard today, natural causes. Certainly that doesn't answer all the questions, because as the medical examiner says, there's a lot of work that needs to go into this. But I think we also got to really open up our eyes and in our minds to how we can do this differently. The MMIWG work has been around for years. We've done a lot of work in relation to it. The recommendations have been around for years. And it's important that we just make sure that we keep bringing them to the front burner. But it's also important, as you heard today, that we balance the work, because we have, at the same time, investigations going on a regular basis. So if you only have a finite number of resources, how can you expedite the work, and what actually innovation you can use? And it's a credit to our investigators, the RCMP and others, as I mentioned, of why we're here today. So rather than the why not, it's the why that matters, and we're going to continue to do that. Chief, anything you want to add?
And thank you for the question. I guess for me, I appreciate the work and the expertise that is in this police precinct here, and just talking to some of the staff and the work that they do, there is a collaboration effort in this process. I guess the question I have and the concern that I have is when it comes down to both levels of government, is the war on homicides, the war on missing and murdered Indigenous women, is that a priority? Because I know precincts have budgets and there's always shortfalls. So with the evolution or evolvement of technology, why is there funding restraints when you can close cases a lot faster? That would be the question I'd have for governments. And I think from our end as chiefs of the nations, I know we can do lobby efforts, political lobby efforts for governments to, expedite the process of increasing funding for forensics. Thank you.
Morning. I'm Chief Kelvin Bruno with Papachaise First Nation. And I also want to add that it wasn't for the families not giving up. They've carried this in their hearts for a long time. And this has been personal for us. Sherry Latterwood here, she's our genealogist. She works in our office. And that's what we're doing as a nation. We're identifying our members. And the Latterwood families are our descendants and our members, along with Jackknifes, our Papachaise people as well. And we've been involved with burial ground issues for over 20 years here in Edmonton, most notably the Rossdale burial site, where we identified Papachaise people in there as well, along with Bruno's. So Sherry, she would bring this up a lot in our office. She would talk about her sister. So this hits close to home. And so it wasn't for them, but also the innovative work that the city police and forensics have done, along with DNA. We're able to bring closure to these families and to lay Irene and Louise to rest. And so this has been a great day for us. And we're here to support, as leaders, as council, the families, and also to help them, because now we have to plan burials. We're also looking at cremation as well. So these are things that are going to continue. So we just want to just let you know that this is really personal for us, and that we're here to support the families. And we also like to acknowledge the work that IAAW does as well too. Very important to stand up for women and women's rights. And so I just want to thank you. Hi.
So we have already identified two other cases that we are actively working on in partnership with the OCME, and I do believe we are going to see some progress. As I may have mentioned or may not have been mentioned, not all of the cases require exhumation. Some of them we do have remains available and or DNA. And for some of them, we will be exploring investigative genetic genealogy as the next step, because if there is no match on the National DNA Databank, then the next logical step, as been mentioned by the chiefs, is using that technology, the advancements in technology to further the cases. And in the past, when you didn't have investigative genetic genealogy, the case would often grow cold if there was no match. This gives us the opportunity to drive things forward and get some answers for families. I have reviewed both investigations on the remains cases from the 70s, and I can tell you that for the time, I feel like they were both handled by detectives from homicide units were consulted, and they did all of the steps that were available at the time. They obtained dental records and disseminated those through the Canadian Dental Journal across Canada. They disseminated descriptions through the Edmonton Journal at the time, They disseminated posters across, community agencies. So they did what they could at the time. They tried fingerprinting. They both were quite extensive, but, in the absence of DNA, in the absence of having that connected missing persons file, it was a challenge.
Can you just do a follow-up to that one? That's the investigative work. What about the missing searches for these two women when they were missing? Have you looked into whether there was enough done to try to find them when there was belief that they were still alive?
So I'll let Inspector Dirksen address the Edmonton Police Service case with Louise, and then I think.
Yeah, this one is not the easy question to answer. With respect to and I'll qualify it by saying that with respect to the missing persons part of the investigation, I can only speak to Louise Latterout's case because EPS investigated that. I would defer to my counterpart with the RCMP, Inspector Brianne Brown, to talk about Irene Jackknife's file, because in her case, we only worked on the UHR part of that. But when we're talking about Louise Latterout's initial missing person investigation, we understand that her family did try to report her missing. They reported her, and when we speak with family members, we believe that we just did not, EPS, we didn't take the report. We didn't list her as missing, and we didn't investigate it as a missing person. And that's not easy to admit, but it is the case. We look back, we cannot find any records of any report being taken by investigators at the time. And family believes that it was Louise's parents who brought her forward, brought the case forward when she went missing in July 1975, shortly before her body was discovered in the river. And as well, again, they tried to report it in the 90s, is what we understand. And I hate to admit it, but we have no record of investigations beginning. And that's unfortunate because had we had a missing person report, I believe we probably could have made a quick link when her body was discovered at the time. And then in 2009, I believe, it was two of Louise's sisters, Sherry and Ruth, came forward and tried to report her missing to our missing persons unit at that time. And we did look into it. The officer at that time pulled a file number, did some checks, felt that the information was ambiguous. It just wasn't there wasn't a clear indication that she was actually missing. There was some discrepancies in the information provided by family about when she went missing, and even some indication that some family members had seen her. And so ultimately, they did pull a file number. They started the investigation. They left it open and provided the information to family that should it become the case that a missing person investigation was appropriate, they would use that as the reference. And then, as Staff Sergeant Harrison stated here a few minutes ago, in 2019, there was a contracted private investigator hired by the Public Guardian's Office, Public Trustee, to investigate Louise's disappearance and to locate her if possible, in an effort to just to resolve some financial questions that had come up through family. Obviously, they were not able to, but they turned to the EPS. That's when, as Kevin mentioned, they linked up with our missing persons unit and formally began the investigation that over the next 3-4 years got us here to today. So I wish I had better news, and we've talked about this with the families, and there is an understanding, but we had some oversights there. I like to believe they did the best they could at the time. I wasn't there, so I can't speak for them, but we made mistakes, and we've changed our processes since then. And we have very robust processes now, partly because of oversights like that.
Can the inspector speak to the staffing?
Good morning. My name is Inspector Brianne Brown with the Alberta RCMP Serious Crimes Branch. So with respect to Miss Jackknife, we understand that the family was of the belief that she was reported missing to the Drayton Valley RCMP. As we began looking into it, we did not locate a file, and we spoke to the individual who the family believed had actually reported her missing, and that person didn't actually report her missing. So I would like to urge the public, if you believe that you have a family member or a friend who's missing, please call in. Don't just rely on somebody else. You may be able to provide the RCMP or the police of jurisdiction additional information that could help the investigation move forward.
At the time, there wouldn't have been as many cases as we see now. I know that our missing persons unit alone fields over 6,000 missing persons calls or reports a year in Edmonton now, and I'm just approximating the number, but it's very high. And I would agree with you that probably the numbers back then were not that high. The unidentified remains cases that we are aware of from the 70s are, that were unsolved that we are aware of was, much less, probably in like 1 or 2 a year. I can't speak to how many missing persons reports there were back then because we don't have the data today, and I'm not sure that we would have that available to us. But in reading the investigations, I can tell you that they did do direct comparisons to known missing persons files at the time. So they were combing through missing persons reports. The CPIC database did exist, the National Police Database, but I believe it was a different form of it back then, and all it allowed for maybe was comparison of descriptors. So things like the National Center for Missing Persons and Unidentified Remains and the corresponding DNA data bank, and that coordination nationally to document missing persons cases so that when one is uploaded, and unidentified remains cases is uploaded, and a match, that didn't exist. And so it would have been a challenge for them if they're just working off file knowledge and investigators kind of comparing notes. I can tell you, and the OCME might step in here a little bit to correct me, but I can tell you that just alone an exhumation could be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. And then there's potential reburial costs that can go with that. Things like investigative genetic genealogy can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, and that doesn't include the DNA sequencing. And those are the types, like investigative genetic genealogy is quite new to policing, especially in Canada, and so those sort of pre-established budgets for those things is a challenge. There's also lots of investigative costs, the resource costs in terms of the OCME, anthropologists, investigators, our crime scenes unit, investigators in the unit, Carrie's work, and so even things like the DNA work, etc. So the total cost of these can get close to $30,000 to $40,000, on a ballpark figure, depending on the requirements. And each case is a little different. So,
just on that note, though, I don't want anybody going away thinking that we're not doing these because of money, because we'll find the money. The reality is, as the investigators said here many, many times, you got to have the things that line up to actually put this into the queue in relation to all the prerequisites to do that. First and foremost, as the Grand Chief mentioned, we would be obviously trying to go to the province, trying to go obviously to the city if need be, if we can't manage it with internal. I don't want anybody to leave here to think that money alone will solve this. We need to make advancements, as the Grand Chief said, into technology and some of those innovative practices. That'll be a bigger investment, which we're certainly working on through Deputy Chief LaForce right now. But I want to be very, very clear on that, because I don't want anybody trying to put $40,000 on the price of a life, because that just doesn't make sense.
Whether or not it's a family member or someone who you said you spoke with and did not report her missing.
Yes, it was a family member. So the RCMP did not receive the report of the missing person until 2022, and that's when we began the investigation.
Can you
Okay, the Alberta RCMP have 29 unidentified human remains that we're working with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner on and continually trying to investigate, gaining familial DNA, etc. We have 487 long-term missing person investigations. So we consider long-term somebody that's been missing more than 30 days.
And so, how do those date back to?
The old, 1959 is our oldest. Okay, thank you.
Any final questions?
Oh, Chief.
Go ahead.
Nista nanaska mau, mamotawe mau. Nanaska mau to winska. Mina nanaska mau mi machu ni migoya no tahaski. Atamskat now kakyo. First and foremost, in my language, I thank to the Creator for allowing me to get up and the life He gives us here on earth. And I shake hands with each and every one of you. For Carrie and her staff, out of respect, as a chief, I should have been able to speak. But you know what? I come here to support the family first and foremost. You know, I come here in a good way. This file is near and dear to me. Murdered, missing Indigenous people, women, girls. There's also men missing in this world. And I come here to share, you know, my condolences, my sympathies, but also to give you some hope that in these shells that we are human beings, you know, our spirit is set free when we pass on to the spirit world, to that place where it's beautiful, where there's no pain, and where the flowers will even sing and talk for you. I think that's how you could look at it. And, you know, I'm here to help in any way. And I, as the chief of Frog Lake and one of the chiefs, I put pressure and I challenge the EPS and the RCMP to look at us as human beings. You know, there's a lot of incidences that our people were not treated very well on this land, you know, and our kindness was taken advantage of. You know, but I think it's time for the world to look at us as human beings, as treaty partners, because you know what, we were here to share the land in a good way. You know, and I think that you remember your sisters who are grandparents now, you know, in a good way, and to live their life and to remember to feed them. You know, as First Nations people on Thanksgiving, Christmas, we offer that spirit plate, and when you pray to them that they would help you through this trying time, you know, I think it's very important that we share with the outside, you know, that what we do, you know, and I think that, you know, I don't have the words that'll change anything. You know what, but I think this starts to begin the journey of closure and healing that you carried for so many years, you know, and I think that I want to share, you know, with the IAWW and the work, and also these two ladies here, they're pioneers, and they're also women who went through a trial and hardships in their life. You know, and I think that, you know, the world has to look at, and the men, you have to respect your woman, and you have to treat them in a good way. Then that's all they want. That's a little secret that the Creator had sent us, how to respect motherhood, because without motherhood, none of us would be here today. You know, I share that in closing because, you know, it was in my heart. I didn't want to drive home and say, I should have said this, because I come in a good way to tell you to move forward, that she's in a good place, that she's in a good place, that she helps you. She's here with us today. Because as a spirit, they move faster than light and sound, you know, and they can be at multiple places. Us as human beings, we don't know that. So I just want to share with that, keep living each day, and one day you'll see each other again in that beautiful place, and it'll be a bountiful reunion because there's a celebration going on there as well as we are celebrating here moving forward in a good way too. With that, thank you for allowing me a few minutes of your time, and I wish nothing but good things for each and every one of your families during this difficult time. You know, that you can walk with your head up, and we need to learn to forgive. You'll never forget, but try and forgive and you'll heal in your heart. Thank you.